Thanks for coming here. How's this? Okay. Anyway, thanks for coming here. We've got one of our most distinguished alums with us today, Ken Feinberg, who graduated in 1970. Was a member of the Law Review, an editor, went to a fancy clerkship in the New York Court of Appeals, was a prosecutor in Lower Manhattan for a while, and then his world changed. He entered the wonderful world of torts. He was involved in probably the first mass tort. There were other ones brewing at the time, but the Agent Orange litigation that grew out of the Vietnam War. Ken ended up serving as something akin to the special master, getting this complicated lawsuit settled. And that launched him on a career involving mass settlements and the mass torts. His resume more or less reads like a history of catastrophe in late 20th century. Always on the end of trying to compensate for the harms that have been done. Aside from the September 11th Victims' Compensation Fund, which is probably the most prominent matter that he's dealt with. He's been involved with the BP oil spill in the Gulf. He's currently involved in these massive settlements involving the defective ignition switches in GM cars. He's a founding partner and founding member and managing partner of Feinberg Rozen right now, a small firm down in Washington, D.C. So he'll speak for about 30 minutes. I'll wrap up for maybe 5 minutes or so after that, and then we'll open the up to questions. So.
Well, I want to thank Mark for that brief introduction. Brief is important. We only have a limited amount of time. Let me, this is a very sophisticated crowd, say. I mean, you guys are tort experts. So let me jump to sort of chapter 5 and avoid the chapters that you need to understand when you evaluate these programs like 9/11 or BP or GM or Boston Marathon or Newtown, Connecticut or Virginia Tech. These compensation programs that I'm involved in, you have to distinguish two types of programs. There are the programs that are a true alternative to the tort system. If you decide to take money as a 9/11 victim or a family of a victim, or if you decide to take money for business interruption or economic harm after the BP oil spill in the Gulf, or if you decide to take money because your daughter was killed in a GM automobile with a defective switch. Now those programs, 9/11, BP, GM, those programs are a true alternative to the tort system. If you take that money, you waive your right to litigate. You can't sue the World Trade Center, the airlines, Massport, the security guard companies, BP, General Motors. Mr. Feinberg, we hereby give up our right to litigate in tort. Instead, we'll take the money. Where do we sign? Now, those programs are very, very different from One Fund Boston after the Marathon bombings, the Virginia Tech shootings, Newtown, Connecticut, Aurora, Colorado, the Indiana State Fair windstorm. Those programs are a gift from private donors around the country who send in checks. They're an alternative to nothing. You can take that money, turn around, hire a lawyer, and litigate against Virginia Tech, against the school board or whatever in Newtown, Connecticut, against the owners of the movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. Go ahead. Now, one of the fascinating things one of the fascinating aspects of all of these programs that are a gift, charitable money, that don't involve a waiver of your right to sue, nobody sues. Why don't they? Why do people in a gift program like the Boston Marathon, why did they take this free money and instead of hiring a lawyer, walk away? There's a lot of research being done now on that subject. But I want to focus today, because of the sophisticated nature of this audience, I want to focus on these three programs that I've mentioned that I've been involved in, that are true alternatives to the tort system. 9/11 by statute, federal law. 13 days after 9/11, Congress passed a law. And the law simply said, anybody who died on 9/11, airplanes, World Trade Center, Pentagon, or anybody who was physically injured on 9/11, can waive their right to litigate and come into a no-fault administrative fund, compensation fund, funded entirely by the taxpayer. Federal money, not airline money, not insurance money, not a mass port, federal money. You don't have to. You don't have to come into this fund. It's voluntary. Well, over the 33 months of that program, 97% of all the families that lost a loved one on 9/11 came into the fund. $7.1 billion was paid by me out of petty cash from the U.S. Treasury. And all but 94 people, or 96 people, decided to take the money. 94 decided to sue, and they all settled their cases 5 years later. There was never a trial on 9/11. Who was responsible? Who was negligent? Never a trial. 2 people did nothing. Nothing. They never entered the fund and they never filed a lawsuit. 2 people, overcome by grief, they did nothing. They let the statute of limitations expire. They let the statutory deadline for filing with me expire. They never did anything because they were in such grief that they couldn't bring themselves to file or sue. Everybody else, 97% came in, 94 people went out, filed a lawsuit, settled with the airlines 5 years later. There you are, 9/11. Wrapped up with a ribbon around it. BP, just as successful. Over the 16 months, now that wasn't Congress, that was BP and a handshake with President Obama. Let's set up a fund, and we recommend Ken Feinberg, and Ken Feinberg will do it. Over 16 months, $6.5 billion paid out. 223,000 releases, I will not sue, from individuals and businesses. 92% of all eligible claimants came into the fund. Now, after I left, after I came home, BP decided, as some of you know, to enter into a Rule 23 class action settlement with the remaining plaintiffs. Well, they're still litigating down there. A disaster. Don't blame me. I'm long gone. When I left, virtually all of the real eligible victims of that oil spill had been paid and signed a release. It worked. GM wasn't even the president. There was such congressional turmoil over GM's alleged cover-up of a defective ignition switch in certain GM automobiles that GM announced to the Congress and the world, we're going to set up an independent compensation program as an alternative to the tort system, and we're going to turn it over to Ken Feinberg, let him design it, administer it, we'll do whatever he says, and you give up your right to sue, and there you are. Now, that program's still ongoing as I'm here today. 4,500 people have filed a claim. We have paid. GM announced that they knew of 13 deaths attributable to the switch. We're up to 67 deaths and about 150 physical injuries so far. And that's how GM works, you see. Now, I can guarantee to the people in this room, some of the conceptual and political backdrop to what I do is on your final torts exam in a few months. I mean, it is vintage Tort 1. You cannot possibly understand these programs without being well-versed in basic conceptual tort law. All of the programs of those three, not the private programs, not the programs that aren't alternatives to the tort system. They have nothing to do with tort. They have a lot to do with trust and estates, but very little to do with tort law. But if you're trying, you guys get this. I mean, this is NYU, you get this. If the goal is to entice people not to sue, but instead voluntarily take advantage of an alternative program that'll compensate. Well, the alternative program has two features. One, there must be enough money in it to attract people not to sue. You can't ask people to sign a release and get $1.60. If you want them to not sue, you've got to tell them that we will pay you a very substantial consideration in return for your voluntary surrender of the right to litigate. Duh, makes a lot of sense. The other thing that you find right away when you are trying to voluntarily get people not to sue, everybody gets a different amount of money, right? It's a fortiori. If my programs are joined at the hip of the tort system, don't sue, we'll pay. Well, the stockbroker, the banker, the lawyer, you've got to pay them more than the waiter, the busboy, the cop, the fireman, the soldier. They make more. They're not going to give up their right to sue if they can't get what they think they might get if they roll the dice in the courtroom. So everybody gets a different amount of money. Now that raises havoc with me, you see, because people get very, very emotional about this, as you can imagine. I'm asked all the time, is my law degree from NYU a help in administering these programs? Not particularly. I don't think it hurts. It's sort of a wash. A divinity degree would be better. A divinity degree, or a degree in psychiatry. You're dealing with individual, very emotional people. It's not about law. The law degree helps design the program and set it up with rules and protocols. It's human nature you're dealing with, individual victims and their families, angry, frustrated, disappointed, saddened. That's the problem. That's the problem, dealing with very emotionally vulnerable people. So when you take on one of these assignments, it's nice to have an NYU law degree behind you, but brace yourself for what you're going to hear. What you're going to hear and what you're going to have to deal with. Now, what do I mean when I say you can't really understand these programs without a basic knowledge of Tort 1? Well, let's look at the three programs. Again, not the gift programs, but the basic three, BP, 9/11 GM. Agent Orange to some extent, but we can talk about that another time. If you read that 9/11 statute, it says in the statute passed by Congress that the methodology that Feinberg will use in calculating damages should be based on state tort law. Well, dust off tort one. I mean, get my notes. It says right in the statute, right in the law, when you evaluate individual claims, you will be guided by tort law. Was the claimant's death or physical injury caused by the terrorist attacks? Or were the terrorist attacks the proximate cause of the death or the injury? Now, the deaths are easy. The deaths are easy. You either died at the World Trade Center and have a police death certificate. You have the airline manifests who were on the planes. Or the military has excellent records at the Pentagon. The deaths aren't a tort problem. The deaths, we could rubber stamp based on secondary evidence like airline manifests, state police, New York City Police Department, Pentagon. Yeah, that's not a problem. Physical injury. You better understand tort law. Physical injuries, filed injuries. Mr. Feinberg, I was injured as a result of the 9/11 attacks. I live in Jersey City. When those World Trade Center towers collapsed, the guck, the smoke, the asbestos dust, the plume wafted over the Hudson. And I have emphysema now. I didn't before. I was breathing that guck for weeks. Pay me. Pay me. Mr. Feinberg, I live on East 96th Street, 4 miles from the World Trade Center. I was hanging a picture on a ladder in my living room when I saw from my window the airplane hit the World Trade Center. I fell off the ladder and broke my leg. Pay me. Pay me. I mean, tort one. Maybe not the ladder with the painting. That might not be a whole excerpt in your book, but it might be one of the notes from a case, right? So, it's basic tort. We won't pay you in Jersey City. We won't pay you if you fell off the ladder. Now, it's not so much that we won't pay you because you can't make a colorable claim based on proximate cause. We won't pay you because we evaluate your tort claim by reading the statute that says a claim asserted in the immediate vicinity of the World Trade Center. Well, we looked at the legislative history. There was none. Immediate vicinity. In my discretion, unfettered, immediate isn't East 96th Street or across the Hudson River. Well, we think it is. Well, then you do it. I don't think it is. I mean, if you want me to do it, and I have unfettered discretion, immediate vicinity means West Street, South Ferry, Canal, and Lower Broadway. That's the immediate vicinity of the World Trade Center, not East 96th Street. Nobody can really argue, unless they live in Connecticut, that East 96th Street's in the immediate vicinity of the World Trade Center. Now, those are the decisions you make, you see. They're tort-based. Now, if you want a great example of tort-based, take a look at the protocol online right now governing the GM case. Was the defective switch the proximate cause of the accident causing death or physical injury. Now, the case is almost entirely circumstantial. Most of these GM accidents occurred years ago. The car is long gone. The black box data in the engine, like on an airplane, long gone. So how do you construct a case that my son, my daughter, my wife, my husband, my whatever, died as a result of a defective switch in an automobile that no longer exists? How? Go to Tort 1 and maybe your class in evidence and construct, for Feinberg, who's evaluating the claims, construct a circumstantial evidence case that the switch was the proximate cause. Now, in fairness to GM, that never took a torts class here, GM says we know of 13 deaths where there's direct evidence it was the switch. We have the car, we have the switch, we have the death, we have the injury. We know by examining the car there's something wrong with the switch. Well, that's not this program. My program is tort-based, proximate cause. What does the police report after the accident say? Did the airbag deploy? If the airbag deployed, it can't be the switch. Because if the airbag deployed, the automobile's on, not off, at the time of the accident. Otherwise, the airbag wouldn't deploy. So if the airbag deployed, you're ineligible. Don't even bother. Don't even bother. You don't meet the eligibility requirements. It can't be the switch. What does the police report say? What do the photographs that were made at the time of the accident, what do they show? Was it a front-end collision where the airbag should have deployed, where the car hit a tree and the engine's practically in the back seat? And no airbag deployed? Sounds like a valid claim to me. What does the insurance investigative report say? What about maintenance records? We don't expect maintenance records that mention the switch, but maintenance, GM dealer. My car keeps stalling, going 70 miles an hour. Stalling at 70, something's wrong. My anti-lock brakes don't work. The power steering locks. I mean, if you've got maintenance records tied to a power off while you're driving, eligibility. Damages? I don't know if you guys have had studied damages yet, but damages are right out of the tort system. What would the victim have earned over a lifetime but for the tragedy? Economic loss. Chapter 8 of your textbook. What about pain and suffering? Add that. Chapter 9 of your textbook. Collateral offsets if and only if you've made a previous settlement with GM before you knew about the switch. Collateral offsets, chapter 10 of your tort book textbook. That's it. That's it. Now, before we take questions from the boss and you, are these programs, forget the alternatives to the tort system, they happen occasionally. They're based on the charitable impulse of the American people, which is unbelievable, and put them aside. That's a whole nother course, you see. But are these programs like 9/11, BP, GM, are they a good idea? Are they sound public policy? Now, don't be too sure. I mean, the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund, I will defend that fund to my dying breath. I think it was sound public policy. I think it was the right thing to do. I think it exhibited the best in the American character. Don't ever do it again. The 9/11 fund was compensation using taxpayer money. Now, bad things happen to good people every day in this country, and there's no 9/11 fund. The idea that Congress will segregate for very special, generous treatment only these people. Everybody else, fend for yourself. If you're a 9/11 victim, we'll pay tax-free. Anybody else, sorry. Now, I think you can, and I do defend the 9/11 fund. At the time, from the perspective of the American people, not the victims, sound public policy at the time. But you should have read some of the emails I got during my administration of the 9/11 fund. Dear Mr. Feinberg, my son died in Oklahoma City. Where's my check? Dear Mr. Feinberg, I don't get it. My daughter died in the basement of the World Trade Center in the original 1993 attack committed by the very same type of people. Where's my check? And it wasn't just terrorism. Dear Mr. Feinberg, I am at a loss to understand. Last year, my wife saved 3 little girls from drowning in the Mississippi River, and then she drowned a heroine. Where's my check? You know, you better be careful when you spell out for public taxpayer money only these people. Everybody else out of luck. Everybody else out of luck. Dear Mr. Feinberg, I don't understand. I'm reading here in the Gulf oil spill, you're paying all of this money to the victims of the BP oil spill. Well, look, I'm still waiting for Exxon to pay me for Exxon Valdez 22 years ago, and I'm still waiting. And you're paying people in 60 days. Doesn't sound fair to me. Fair. Wrong word. What's fair about any of this? Just. What's just about any of this? This isn't about justice or fairness. Forget it. It's mercy. It's about mercy, not justice or fairness. But I can understand why an Exxon victim ain't too pleased with the speed at which BP is paying claims. And you know, all I can tell people is, well, go ask the Congress, go ask BP. GM, Mr. Feinberg, I don't understand. My son died in an auto accident, and it was a GM switch. Well, what car were you driving? He was driving a Mercedes. Now look, if your kid was driving a Mercedes, it can't be a GM switch. It's a Mercedes switch. No, my mechanic told me it was a GM switch. Get me the name and number of your mechanic. Oh, he died. He's not around anymore. Ineligible. There are hundreds of thousands of people with recalled GM automobiles that are not eligible to participate in this program. So, insofar, certainly the 9/11 fund, you'll never see that case again. You'll never see that fund again. The 9/11 fund is better studied not in tort law, better studied in history class, because it is a unique response to an unprecedented national tragedy. Now let me close before we get some Q&A going here. People ask me all the time, what's the most difficult aspect of designing, implementing, and administering all of these programs, tort, non-tort, whatever? By far, the most difficult is when you agree, as you must be willing to do, to meet with any individual claimant, one-on-one in confidence. It is absolutely debilitating. You have to do it. Anybody who lost a loved one on 9/11, anyone who lost a loved one because of a GM automobile, who wants to see me, come and see me. Now, when people come to see, a lot of people don't want to come and see me. A lot of people grieve in private. They close the door and they want nothing to do with anybody. They send in their claim, They get paid, they move on, or they don't, but that's it. Some people grieve when they want to see me. Now, when they come and see me, they never really come to see me to talk about money. Money isn't on their mind. They come for two reasons. One, to vent about life's unfairness. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my daughter. She had just graduated William and Mary Law School. She had a first-year law associate job at a law firm in Richmond. She was an angel. And because of the GM cover-up, I lost my daughter. Where is the justice? There is no God. No God, Mr. Feinberg, could allow this to happen. My daughter's gone. Or people come to see me to validate the memory of a lost loved one. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my husband at the World Trade Center. He was a fireman. We were married for 25 years. And I'd like to, at this hearing now, I'd like to start my hearing by showing you a video of our wedding 25 years ago. Mrs. Jones, you don't have to show me that video. It'll be very emotional, and it won't impact compensation one penny. You're going to watch. I want you to see what those murderers did to my husband. Show the video. My office was filled with memorabilia, ribbons, diplomas, medals, certificates of good conduct, honors. I mean, it was unbelievable. Filled my office to the brim. I couldn't get in the office with memorabilia, where people come and want to validate what it's like, the lost one, and what that lost loved one meant to them. It's unbelievable. And the stories you hear when you go one-on-one. Two examples. Two. 24-year-old woman comes to see me. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my husband. He was a fireman at the World Trade Center. He left me with our two children, 6 and 4. Now, you're going to give me $2.5 million. I want it in 30 days. 30 days? Mrs. Jones, this is the federal government. This is the Treasury. This is taxpayer money. The bureaucracy, it may take more than 30 days to cut the check. 30 days! Why do you need the money in 30 days? Why? I'll tell you why. I have terminal cancer. I have 10 weeks to live. My husband was going to survive me and take care of our two children. Now they're going to be orphans. I still have my faculties for a few more weeks, Mr. Feinberg. I got to get this money and set up a trust for my two kids. Now they're going to be orphans. Well, we accelerated the money. 8 weeks later, she died. I mean, unbelievable. Stories like this. And then there's this story, and I'd be interested. I mean, you guys are all sort of masters of the universe. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done with this real claim? A real story. A 24-year-old woman comes to me sobbing so I thought she might collapse. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my husband. He was a fireman at the World Trade Center. He was Mr. Mom. Every day that he wasn't working at the firehouse, he was home, teaching our 6-year-old how to play baseball, teaching our 4-year-old how to read, reading a bedtime story to our 2-year-old. What a cook! Mr. Mom cooked all our meals. He was the gardener around the house, mowing the lawn, planting the flowers. Mr. Feinberg, I don't care how much money you give me. My husband, Mr. Mom, my husband is gone. The only reason I haven't jumped out a window to join him is our 3 kids. But my life is over. It is over. I'm going through the motions. She leaves. The next day, I get a telephone call from a lawyer in Queens. Mr. Feinberg, yes. Did you meet yesterday with the lady, Mr. Mom, and the 3 kids, 6, 4, and 2? I go, yes. Terrible. He goes, now look, you've got a tough job. It ain't easy. I don't envy what you got to do. But I got to tell you, Mr. Feinberg, she doesn't know that Mr. Mom has 2 other kids by his girlfriend in Queens, 5 and 3. And I'm telling you this because I represent the girlfriend, and when you cut your check from the 9/11 fund, there's not 3 surviving children, there's 5 surviving children. But I'm sure you'll do the right thing. Click, he hangs up. Do you tell her? Do you tell her about these 2 kids? I know there's some lawyer here. Paternity, yes, paternity. Do you tell the wife about the 2 other kids? Now, we went around and around and around on that. I didn't tell her. Not my place. I'm a federal bureaucrat trying to get money out the door. I don't know the facts. I don't know all the circumstances. She has a memory of her husband. I'm not about to. Now, that was, what, 12, 13 years ago. I'll bet you anything they know now. But not my place. We cut 1 check to the wife and the 3 kids and cut a separate check to the girlfriend as the guardian of the 2 kids. That's it. We move on. Finally, I will tell you this, good way to end and take some questions. In all the years I do these programs, I've only had 1 claim. 1. In all these years, thousands of claims. A lady after 9/11 came to see me. You guys will appreciate this. She says to me, Mr. Feinberg, I lost my husband at the World Trade Center. Now, am I right that no matter what I say in this hearing, you're not going to change the award? I go, that's right. We're going to give you $2.9 million, and this is a hearing, voluntary. You want to come and see me, that's fine. She goes, all right, I wanted to make sure about that, because I want to tell you something. My husband was scum. He ruined my life. He's so much better off dead than he ever was alive. I'm at last getting justice. I waited all these years for some opportunity. Thank God he's gone. Now I get $2.9 million. It ain't enough for the torture I went through, married to him, but at least I'm going to get paid for something. But I just wanted to make sure I'm getting this money. There is some justice in this world. Now, that was a very unique claim, I must say. So there we are, and we'll take questions.
It was as I'd hoped. I mean, if you're to frame, what Ken Feinberg is most expert at, and to do it in kind of a tort framework, I would say that out of anybody in human history, Ken probably understands the compensatory damages remedy better than anybody else. And what you've just heard is a description about how tort law, which you think of, in a derogatory way on the street, as there's ambulance chasers going after money, you got greedy tort plaintiffs going after money. It's just about the money or the compensatory damages remedy at the end of the lawsuit. And of course, it's not at all that. Compensatory damages remedy is deeply psychological for all the reasons Ken just described, because what you're doing in these cases quite routinely is you're trying to compensate something that quite simply cannot be compensated by money. Wrongful death is the most extreme, but severe bodily injury, there's no way that a few $1 million or whatever makes somebody whole when we're talking about severe bodily harm. And so there is just a massive emotional component to all of that, part of tort practice, that there's no possible way you can convey that in a torts class, nor can most people actually even come close to understanding it through tort practice itself. The idea in tort class, the idea in tort doctrine is that compensatory damages make the plaintiff whole. That's all you have to say about it, nothing more, and you move on and you talk about other aspects of tort doctrine. And yet, you know, if you could gather from the remarks from Ken here, is that the practice of awarding compensatory tort damages is hardly about simply making people whole, because what it means to be made whole in a context like this is extraordinarily complex. It's not a legal question. It is, you know, you go to divinity school, you're a psychiatrist or whatever, but what you're trying to do is come to some sort of peace, closure, to the best that you can, using money as the medium for doing so. Now, the interesting question, you know, to take from this is it's really hard to teach this in torts class. You don't get it by reading appellate opinions. The cases are always tragic, but it's abstract and analytic. But the reality of it is not something that's lost on the practice of tort law. Because if you think that tort law is just about the compensatory damages remedy, then you've completely missed everything that Ken was just describing. Because if you are in that world and you're experiencing it, and trial judges, of course, have this kind of experience, and you're thinking about, well, what kind of tort system should we have? What you realize pretty clearly is that what we're talking about here, what the common law calls irreparable injuries. These are a category that if we have to compensate them, of course we'll do so with the compensatory damages remedy. But let's not pretend that these are injuries that in general can be adequately compensated with money. That's why we call them irreparable. Now, within the common law, this is a remedies doctrine. It's not one you would think of as tort, but the logic of it is so obvious after hearing Ken that there's no question in my mind that this deeply informs the way that tort law is in fact formed and practiced. Is that the common law principle when you're dealing with irreparable injuries is that obviously what you should try to do is to prevent them in the first instance. Insofar as these injuries happen, of course, we'll try to clean up the mess the best we can and understand, though, that the money is never going to make up for a lost life. So the very simple idea that we're dealing with a world of irreparable harms and the reality of those irreparable harms are brought to light over and over again by the stories that Ken tells makes you understand that when you're thinking about tort doctrine, of course a compensatory damages remedy is helpful, but to really understand tort law, you need to understand the inadequacies of the compensatory damages remedy. In the light of those inadequacies, how do you set up tort rules to govern behavior and so on? When people ask me why I spend my life doing this, isn't it horrible and everything else? And the point is that what you want to do is make the world a safer place. When things go bad, of course, that's when we wish things had been differently, but it doesn't mean that we can't prevent those kind of bad outcomes from moving forward. And I'm pretty confident that Ken's understanding of tort law, after all, this isn't that tort law is a bad thing. As compensation, is it a good thing? No. As a method of responsibility, prevention, deterrence, or whatever, absolutely essential. And I think to really fully appreciate the psychological reality of that is just to understand, you know, to listen to those stories that he tells, because that's the reality of tort law. Money helps, but money hardly comes close to compensating these harms. So we'll take questions from the group. Identify yourself if you can before asking a question. Go to one of the microphones because it's being taped, so that way we can, those who aren't here can hear the question on the videotape. All right, well, while you go back there, I'll ask questions since I was putting words in your mouth as to how you understand tort law. If you could, respond to what I said there, to the extent to which you think this...
I have a couple of responses to those statements. First, is tort compensation adequate to make the victim whole? No. Money is a very poor substitute for injury, loss, death. Somebody have a better way? Does somebody have a better way? If you think that the programs that I administer make the victim whole, you are sadly mistaken. The compensation that I provide tied to the tort system is not any more adequate than the tort system itself. And one of the difficulties I have is when I try and explain to victims or their families how all I can do is give you this money. I got a call from a victim of the Boston Marathon. He was running and it was right there when the bombs went off and blew his leg off. He called me up. Mr. Feinberg, I'd like to come and see you, but I'm still in rehab in Spalding, in the hospital in Boston. I said, that's all right. I'll come to see you. So I went over there. This is exactly the point Mark's making. I went over there. I walk into his hospital room. There he is lying in a bed, hospital bed, with a stump. On his lap, his 9-year-old son. And around the hospital bed, his wife, his mother, his brother. I say, Mr. Jones, this is terrible, horrible. I'm here to tell you that One Fund Boston is going to give you a check, tax-free, for $1,125,000. He looks at me. $1,125,000, huh? I got a better idea. Keep the money. Give me my leg back. How's that? Give me my leg back. Sorry, Mr. Jones, I wish I had that power. I don't. It's all I can do. Inadequate, you see. But is there a better way? I mean, for over 200 years, we've thought about and written law review articles about whether there's a better way. I haven't read a better way. What's a better way? In a capitalist society, free market, it's money. Money's the equalizer. It's always been that way. My compensation fund removes from the litigation system the process for obtaining money, but money is still the end game. It's the whole rhyme and purpose of the program is money at the end game. Secondly, second point made. This is a great exam question, actually. Do the compensation programs that I design and administer fail to give true value to theories of tort deterrence? Insofar as the tort system is designed by punishing the wrongdoer through money, insofar as the tort system is designed to deter negligent conduct, reckless conduct, inappropriate conduct, do these programs that I administer fail to take into account theories of tort deterrence? If you pay everybody in 9/11 a check and there's no lawsuits, how are you going to make the airline safer or the World Trade Center safer or Massport safer? Doesn't the tort system act as a check on improper behavior? Now, I hear that all the time in law schools from those who challenge these programs of mine. And I have a couple of answers. One, you're right. These programs don't take into account theories of tort deterrence. That's why they're so rare, you see. Don't try and build too much of an argument about theories of tort deterrence by looking at these three programs in the last 15 years. Because theories of tort deterrence continue to survive in the 99.9% of the rest of the tort system. Secondly, the flip side of tort deterrence is over-deterrence. 94 people opted out of the 9/11 fund, and most of them said they're opting out because their dead wife or their dead husband would want me to opt out in order to make the airlines safer by litigation. My answer, don't be ridiculous. First of all, you're not going to make the airlines any safer by filing a lawsuit. The airlines are already being made safer every day through regulatory activity. If you want to make the American transportation system safer, sue Amtrak. Sue the cargo companies in New Orleans or at ports around the United States where an atomic bomb may come in pieces in a cargo ship. The airlines, how much safer are you going to make the airlines than now? And besides, you really believe you're going to make the airlines safer? Why? There's 93 other people who opted out. They're going to make the airlines safer. You don't have to sue. Why don't you take this money and let the other 93 people sue to make the airlines safer? over deterrence. Well, you get those arguments, see? So I don't really think that these three, BP, GM, 9/11, I mean, you can make the academic arguments, but as a practical matter, I don't think that there's much to it. I think there's a great deal to the argument that workers' comp programs in 50 states or some other administrative alternatives to the tort system might undervalue tort deterrence in the workplace. That's another argument altogether.
So, do we have any? Oh, here we go. Good.
Oh, good, because I would have been embarrassed if I had left my alma mater without a few questions from this distinguished, sophisticated crowd.
I can't possibly imagine that would happen.
Yep. Okay. Good, you'll start.
Yes. So I'm Doug Linder, I'm a 3L. Thank you for being here and for giving this enlightening talk. My question is this. With respect to the programs that take the place of the tort system, you've cast some doubt on whether you think they're a good idea in the abstract, whether they should continue and be common. But if they are to continue, do you think there is some better way to administer this than to have one distinguished person, a private citizen who everyone goes to every time we need to do this? Or should there be some government office or some permanent system?
That is a very good first question, I must say. And there are two problems with delegating to me this type of authority. You've mentioned one. No checks and balances. No appeals. No committees. Under the guise of efficiency, speed, cost effectiveness, administrative convenience, let's just delegate to one guy and let him do the job, and we wash our hands of it. That's the easiest, most cost-effective, consistent, certain way to do it. I think there's big problems with that. Now, I don't think the problems are as important in a law school class as in a political science class. I mean, I'm not sure it's a very good idea, and I tend to think it's not, to delegate all of this authority to one person and just say, you do it. You did it last time and you did it well, so it's a perfect cover for us. It's a problem. You're right. Now, people say you're implicit in your other comment. If I do it over again, is there a different way to make it better? Yeah. Don't tie it to the tort system and give everybody the same amount of money. Don't pit one against another. You're going to get $3 million, you're going to get $2 million. I'm only getting 2 and my neighbor's getting 3. What do you have against my wife who died? You didn't even know her. That's right. It's a problem. You fuel the very tension and the very emotion you're trying to suffocate by coming up with the program in the first place. And yet you're fueling it by giving everybody a different amount of money because it's tied to the tort system. You have to. Very problematic, I must say.
Thank you.
Next. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Anna. I'm an LLM student. Thank you for being here.
I'm sorry?
I said, my name is Anna. I'm an LLM student, and thanks for being here. My question has to do with a comment that you made early on about some research into why people quite readily sign away the right to sue. I wonder if there's been, you can tell us a little bit more about those 93 or 94 people, if the imagined idea of deterrence is really something that they all think they're moving forward. And my question goes to, it's more about what your role is. Do you have any obligation to those people who opted out to encourage them to opt in? Do you have an obligation to steer them away from the tort system? How do you view that?
I try and encourage them not to sue. I try and encourage them by telling them that if they do sue, they may get more money, they may get more satisfaction. But the policymakers who assigned this task to me don't want lawsuits. It's not my role. Policymakers decide, let's set up a 9/11 fund, a BP fund, an oil spill fund, a GM fund. They are looking to divert people out of the tort system. In a way, I'm their agent. And I'm trying to encourage them voluntarily to give up that lawsuit option. Now, where I get a lot of help in that regard is from the judges. In 9/11, all of the 94 that opted out went to Judge Hellerstein in the Southern District. He told them, each one of them, I'll give you a fair trial, you're entitled to do this, and I will protect your interests. Are you sure you don't want to go down the street and see Feinberg, who'll get you your money in 60 days? No roll of the dice, no uncertainty. Are you sure? Now, if you are sure you don't want him, fine. Judge Barbier in New Orleans, in the BP oil spill, anybody who wants to come into the class, you're invited. But are you sure Feinberg's over here settling cases right and left and paying billions of dollars? Are you sure? Judge, we don't think you ought to encourage people to go to Feinberg. Why not? 220,000 releases, that's 220,000 people that I don't have to deal with in the class. Why wouldn't I encourage it? It's on the up and up. Now, why don't people come in, and why did the 94 sue? Well, I met with the 94. None of them avoided my fund because they thought they could get more money. That's ridiculous. You couldn't get more money. Maybe a couple did, but then they had to give 25% of the recovery to their lawyer. Maybe they did. Most people told me, one, we heard Professor Geistfeld. We heard what he said. We are suing because my dead wife would want me to make the airline safer. Or we are suing because only in a lawsuit will we really find out who was responsible for 9/11. In a lawsuit, that'll all come out. I said, it won't come out in a lawsuit. You're not going to find out. If you want to find out what really happened, go down to the special committee established by Congress to look into the attacks. They're going to issue a report. They'll tell you everything. Go to the Select Committee on Intelligence in the Senate and the House. The CIA committee. They're going to issue a report. That's where you'll find out. You're not going to find out in a lawsuit with national security overtones what happened. That's crazy. You know? 94 people said, thank you, Judge, thank you, Ken, we're going to sue. Fine. Much more problematic are the two people that were paralyzed and did nothing. That was really a blow. Sue if you want, but do something before the statute expires. Anyone? Next question.
Hi, my name's Noah. I'm a 3L.
I know you well.
It's good to see you, Ken. Two questions. You mentioned that the problem with the 9/11 fund was that other victims did not get compensated, and as a relative matter, that's unfair. So I was wondering about your response to two responses to that. One is, Oklahoma City victims, we're not going to get taxpayer money anyway, so what's the problem? Why not at least compensate these people? And another spin would be, why not expand the number of eligible victims? So other countries like Israel, for example, offer payments and psychological counseling to all victims of terrorism.
First of all, why do you say that Oklahoma City victims weren't going to get paid public money anyway? I don't know why that follows. Why aren't Oklahoma City victims of an American terrorist attack as eligible as anybody to get public money? Now, if what you mean by that is, but they didn't have the political clout to get that money, so why not give it to those who do have the political clout? That's a rather Machiavellian approach. But that's exactly what happened. But I wonder whether that doesn't leave a sour taste in the minds not only of Oklahoma victims and their families, but any victim of a disaster where they're innocent, and yet they're not eligible. I mean, to what extent is paying just 9/11 antithetical to constitutional theories of egalitarianism and equal protection of the law, and everybody's life is valued. And I mean, I just wonder whether singling out 9/11 as the sole political objective of political power is just, or does it do harm to the American constitutional and Republican system? That's the problem. Now, why don't we pay everybody who is an innocent victim? Well, they do that in other countries through either the social service network. Germany's done something like that since Bismarck. There is a floor of health and related cost where government-funded programs provide that floor. Nowhere on earth does anybody talk about paying victims millions of dollars instead of litigation. It's one thing to say, in America we have a bad system. Anybody who's harmed innocently, or not for that matter, ought to get free health insurance, free mortgage payments, your car, automobile payment ought to be protected. Maybe, maybe. The idea that in addition we'll give you $3 million if you promise not to sue. Well, no other country allows you to sue for $3 million. No other country. So it's all about the dollars. I mean, if you have a system of social safety network and you don't have a litigation system like in the United States, sure. Right now, if you're murdered in New York City, God forbid, your family will get what, $5,000? There's some victim assistance. There's some pittance that reflects, here's a few dollars to pay for the last 2 payments in your automobile. 3 million? 7 billion? 5 billion? Unheard of. I went over to England after the terrorist attacks, the buses and the subways. 52 dead. I go to testify at Parliament. Very interesting. Mr. Feinberg, we've been following your program after 9/11. We're thinking of doing something like that here in England for 52 terrorists dead. How did it work? Well, we set up this fund, and it was taxpayer money, and we administered it. Wonderful. What a fabulous program. How much did you pay, on average, to each death? A little over $2 million. I'm on the next British Airways plane home. They heard those numbers and gagged. Mr. Feinberg, in our country, we don't allow payment like that in. Thank you very much for your visit. This was very enlightening. And I think they ended up giving each victim, I don't know, a few $1,000s. So America is really unique in that regard. It's not transportable anywhere else.
Hi, my name is Winston. I'm a 1L. My question is actually very similar to that, but I'd already stood up, so I thought I'd stay.
I'll try and give a different answer.
Okay, well, I'll maybe narrow it a little bit. Can you tell us a bit more about the decision to use public money and what, if any, debate there was at the time? Because I'm actually very interested in, you alluded to earlier that at the time, right around 9/11, that felt like a very popular decision and people could get on board with, but that, that's because they had a lot of political clout. It was sort of a national shared tragedy, but just generally the decision to use public money in the abstract, but also at that moment.
If Congress had waited 2 more weeks, I don't think there would have been a 9/11 fund. It was not this type of fund. This was a very emotional response. Congress, within 2 weeks of 9/11, wanted to do something to demonstrate to the country and the world, we take care of our own. We will show everybody how we take care of our own family. Now, it's true that the genesis of the 9/11 were the airlines coming to Congress saying, we need help. If you don't come up with a program, people will be afraid to fly because of 9/11. They'll be afraid to fly. And lawsuits will encourage people not to fly. Forget that we'll win the suits. The mere fact that suits are filed will be in the newspaper, and people will be afraid to fly and will go bankrupt. Well, they went bankrupt anyway. But the fact is, Congress reacted by setting up this very generous fund that went way beyond the airlines. And very emotional patriotism. It was a lot of patriotism. You may have killed these people. We'll show you we take care of you're not gonna, we will rally around the victims. That's a very emotional, patriotic thing. That's the American flag, you see. And that was a major reason for this. And I think if it happened again, God forbid, I don't think Congress would react the same way. There was no 9/11 fund after Katrina, 1,000 people died. There was no 9/11 fund after the Boston Marathon. That was not public money, that was private money. I mean, it's a one-off, the 9/11 fund. Good thing, too.
Hi, my name's Mitch Stern. I'm a 2L. And I was curious, I guess, at what point are programs like these essentially, filling in where we could have, an insurance system, or you mentioned before, sort of like a, Social Security disability, that, if you just had sort of a more robust system there, that is, arguably a more efficient way of doing it. If, somehow, if the government is going to do this for the 9/11 fund, there's no reason you couldn't, extend that program, have it be ongoing for, the whole country, and have a certain amount of tax dollars go in, and you have payments going out when, someone's working, and you can issue out payments based upon, prior tax returns, or however you want to measure, income potential. And so I guess in that regard, there's certainly little doubt in my mind that at least in these cases, they're, more efficient per se than litigation. But if, what we're really going after is, is compensation, then is maybe, a more insurance-like system the answer. Or alternatively, if what we're going for is, sort of overall kind of healing and recovery, should we be talking about more comprehensive, psychological services that, I found your stories incredibly moving, but it seems to me that, these are people that maybe should be talking to someone who's got a, advanced degree in psychology.
Let me just say, very reasonable. That's a very reasonable statement. Very reasonable. And backing up the reason of your, I'm going to say in a minute why it hasn't got a prayer, but it's so reasonable, it doesn't have a prayer. The fact of the matter is, your argument has been made over and over again for the last 100 years in this country. The best example of your argument, the best example I know of your argument, in 50 states we have a workers' compensation system. You cannot sue as an employee, injured on the job, go to your workers' comp agency, you will be paid in lieu of going to court. Wonderful idea. Second, to show you how unrealistic it is to think that you could ever go from that academic conceptual approach to reality. The American system is so antithetical to that type of communitarian reliance, as opposed to every individual has their own responsibility. Private insurance. If you don't want to buy private insurance, that's your problem. If you'd rather roll the dice with no insurance, that's your problem, not the community's. The fight over the last 50 years over single-payer health insurance. The fight over the Affordable Care Act, which isn't even single-payer health insurance. It buys into the notion of individual obligation to buy insurance, unless you can't afford it. But then if you can't afford it, you're going to go to a private carrier to get that insurance. So the idea that we ought to just sit down and reasonably replace the vagaries and uncertainties of the existing system with a model along the lines of what you have reasonably articulated. Makes a lot of sense. Political science-wise, it doesn't have a prayer. Senator Kennedy tried. He was in the Senate for 45 years, Ted Kennedy. He tried over and over again to use your words and come up just in the health system with a single payer. Communitarian, Medicare, not a chance. Not a chance. Made a lot of sense, not a chance. And I don't defend or criticize that approach, other than to say any type of European Bismarck or any type of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security expansion designed to provide an alternative to the litigation system that will replace these single programs that I do once every 5 years, VP, 9/11. No political muscle to do it. No political muscle. It's not the American way. It's just not. And for that reason, I think we're in a discussion, but in torts, I assume you guys, if you haven't already, will soon be taking a quick look at the New Zealand health system, the New Zealand public insurance system, cradle to grave insurance. Every tort class, I was out with Professor Sugarman at Birmingham a couple of months ago. What about New Zealand? New Zealand? There are more sheep than people. How are you going to get a New Zealand? I mean, there's no interest in this country in New Zealand and the way they deal with injuries, accidents, deaths. So, yeah, there's the workers' comp system, check mark next to your argument, is the New Zealand cradle-to-grave system of communitarian insurance. Check mark to your argument. Everybody else, you're dreaming. You're dreaming. Doesn't mean you're wrong, you're just dreaming. Couple more?
Well, I think we still have 2 more hours of Ken for those of us who have torts this afternoon. So we'll conclude here. And those in my torts class, we're not studying the New Zealand plan. Don't worry about that.
But you know all about it. Thank you.